Hey, this is Jack, and this video is called Dating Women Helped Me Understand Men. It's a reaction video to a video from Anna Akana. She is a comedian and social commentator, and let's get right into it. And if you like these videos, please like and subscribe to the channel. This is an awesome community to be part of. We would love to have you here.
So as you may remember, I came out as bisexual last year. And since then, I have been dating women. And what I found very fascinating is that the more I date women, the more I find myself understanding heterosexual men.
Well, that's a good thing.
Let me explain. Exhibit A. I was on a first date with a girl who asked me out, by the way. This is relevant. Because when the check came, she never once made a move to pay. Not even like the fake, let me reach for my purse move. And though I don't mind paying on a date, part of me felt like, the offer would have been nice. I was also a little taken aback that she didn't even say thank you. I never heard from her.
Oh no.
It really made me feel like she just asked me out so she could have a free dinner. And
Yes, I think this in some ways is the core masculine fear, right? That you just want a free ride. I'm being taken advantage of. You're not that interested in me. You knew you weren't that interested in me, and you still want me to pay for dinner. So I hear you.
And the moment I thought that, I was like, oh my God, I sound like all of my guy friends right now. And my argument against why guys should pay for dates has always been like, look, girls take hours to get ready. Our investment is looking really nice for you. Makeup, clothes, that costs money too. But we were both girls in this situation. We both took hours to get ready, so I definitely felt slighted.
So I hear this this kind of argument about the guy pays for dinner and you pay for your beautification. And I think it's good to acknowledge that perspective. It's good for a guy to be open to that perspective because you're probably not maybe tracking how much time, energy, money, investment, thought, care goes into that. I also prefer not to be in that perspective, in that it seems to me a little bit like a sort of like a tit for tat, almost like a post hoc rationalization, right? So I've done all this, so therefore you should pay for dinner. I think ideally you want the guy that actually just wants to buy you dinner, right? Because he wants to invest, because he's initiating dates with you, because he could provide or wants to provide. Do you know what I mean? Rather than it being that we sort of have to justify. I get a bit, what do I get? I get a bit concerned possibly about that mindset that sort of says, well, I did all this, therefore you should do that. Because it still seems to me, as I say, a little bit of a tit for tat style of negotiation, rather than just maybe it's okay for you to receive. Because actually for most women, that's an edge, particularly I'd say in modern and postmodern culture. So it's okay for you to receive that he's actually going to contribute more for this particular date. Now, it might be that down the line, you take him on an amazing date, or there's all other ways that you contribute, you know what I mean? But actually just being in the giving and receiving, because that's the core dynamic in some ways, right? You want to find a guy that wants to give to you, not because you did a bunch of things for him, right? Which is in some ways a sophisticated giving to get strategy. And we want to become more conscious of that. You actually want the guy that wants to give to you, not that you're going to take advantage of that, because you're going to give in all sorts of other and complementary ways, and your beingness and your radiance and all those things are gifts anyway to the masculine. Do you get what I'm kind of pointing at here? Let's roll.
Exhibit B. On another date, I went back to a girl's house and I ended up making friends with her cat. That's not a pun. I'm talking about her literal, actual animal. And she said, wow, my cat never likes anyone. I better go out and buy a wedding dress.
Oh.
And again, I felt like I got some serious perspective. I have been guilty of making these kinds of jokes on dates with men. I never really thought anything of it. I was just being silly. But then when I was on
the question is it a joke, and how would you know?
Receiving end of it, I suddenly understood the panic. And finally, exhibit.
As in, is it a joke, or could it also be this Freudian slip? Could it also be a little bit of like an anxious attachment, premature imagining a relationship kind of thing? It's also just good to be aware the kind of impact that these statements can have on people. Yeah, that runs in both directions, right? You may have had the experience of a guy starts, talking about, well, maybe we could do this in the summer or travel together, or I'd love to take you to do this, this, and this. And it builds for you a sense like, oh, he's really imagining a future. And then at some point he's not into it. And you're like, hey, what was all that stuff about being on the beaches of Brazil? So this definitely cuts in both directions. Have you had an experience of this? Leave me a comment below. I want to know, what is your experience of this?
Exhibit C. One girl invited me back into her house, and her specific words were, do you want to come in and make out? Obviously, I'm like, yeah, you're really pretty. I want to press my face to yours. But then when we got there,
I love, by the way, how specific that request is. Like, do you want to come in and make out? Like, I sort of almost admire the boldness and explicitness of it. And actually reminds me, there's a joke I have with a friend about one time his being in a hot tub and someone turning to him and just saying, "Are you available for a makeout?" And at least to my British sensibilities, that sounds like, I mean, it's so kind of clean and upfront of a request, but also almost to the point where it lacks some kind of mystery or intrigue or romance, for me at least. What do you think of that? Let me know. Leave me a comment below.
there, we both just sat on the couch and she talked till like 3 a.m. And I was like, yo,
No.
girl, I'm gonna wake up at like 6 a.m. I was told there would be kisses
Where are the
here.
kisses?
There are no kisses. And like, look, I don't want to sound like an asshole. Like, I don't mind talking. I love talking. But she could have said, do you want to come in and just talk?
But then
And
you
I
would've
would have
gone.
had totally different expectations for the evening. You know, finally I
This is the
started
power of
falling
fame,
asleep
right?
and I was like, hey, I gotta go. And I gave her one kiss and left. And I felt sad that the amount of kisses promised
Were
did
there
not
kisses
equal the
specifically
amount of
promised?
kisses delivered. And once again, I
How
felt
many
like a
kisses
dude
making
who was
you count?
upset that I did not receive the expected physical kisses I was promised.
So this is obviously an interesting question. I'm curious. So was this one a bait and switch? It seems like a slightly strange bait and switch for me, right? To invite someone into your apartment under the pretense that things are going to get physical and then to seemingly have no interest in that. I'm not sure that's going to be a common bait and switch. I imagine for a lot of people, they would actually be afraid to invite someone into their apartment lest they get the wrong idea that it could be something physical, rather than the other way around, like I frame it up front as something physical and then I don't deliver. I'm curious what the dynamics were in this particular date, right? Could it be that the person invited her in wanted to, in effect, give her a green light, but actually still wanted her to make the move? Like maybe she's sort of in the more receptive feminine where she actually wants the other person to initiate. Yeah, I'm also curious what would have you sit and kind of listen to someone for hour after hour after hour. Now, have we been in that experience? Certainly, I have been in that experience. I don't like being in that experience when I'm at my most conscious. I don't allow those experiences to unfold. Just to even take the makeout out of it, just why do people talk incessantly? Right now, it's easy to be in judgment of that. Sometimes, yes, it can be unconscious storyteller, right? Like someone who effectively needs to be doing amateur dramatics, doesn't have a stage, and therefore sort of treats everyone like a stage, but isn't really in what I would call direct contact with the people in front of them. But oftentimes, people talk incessantly. Why? Because they're anxious. There could also, I'm curious, be another perspective on this. And again, it may or may not be applicable in this actual circumstance, but it could be that someone's into you, but they're talking a lot because they're anxious about the fact that they're into you and they can feel that physical attraction rising and they don't really know what to do with it. And they're not exactly sure, like they've green lighted you, but you're not really making any moves. So are you really into this or not? And so the talking is to like fill the silence and to try and down regulate the stress and anxiety that I'm feeling. So if you notice that in someone else, you can be conscious and present, right? And sometimes that might be breaking through someone's incessant talking, changing the topic, asking to pause, moving the direction of the energy, putting your hand just on someone, even just, on a shoulder or an elbow or a hand or a knee, just to actually make contact and change the quality of the consciousness between you. So we're all going to be out to lunch at times. I'm out to lunch a lot, and I don't mean that I rack up huge lunch bills in restaurants. I mean, I lose consciousness a lot. And I imagine that most of us as humans do. So if you happen to be the more conscious person in the room, so to speak, have that work for you.
And I wanted to talk about this because I felt like this has really been expanding my perspective when it comes to dating.
That's a good thing.
I finally understand a lot of the complaints my male friends have
I think
about
that's a good thing
dating
to
that
understand those
I
complaints.
admit I would usually
Certainly a good thing not
dismiss.
to just dismiss
But
them.
now
There's
I really
nobody
get
that's
it when they
truth in it.
say,
Dating is just so expensive, man. Sometimes I feel like a girl doesn't even
So just on that expensive one, certainly and I know a lot of guys can relate to that, right? Because sometimes you can create what you could call unremarkable dating experiences, just taking someone to a somewhat decent restaurant in a somewhat expensive city. If you're paying for like an Uber in and an Uber out, let's say, so that you can drink or so that you don't have to worry too much about parking, because parking's difficult, right? You're not just going to drive into central London. Many American cities, the same thing. You easily can be in at $100 to $200 or more, and not for anything that she's going to be like too wowed by, right? So you might say, well, put more creative thought into it, take me on an amazing hike, take me surfing, let's go ride ATVs, let's throw axes, right? There's lots of things that you could do, and maybe that is part of the answer, but it's just also acknowledging the classic, like, yeah, let's go out for dinner, which most people enjoy that as a date. And you might say, well, look, I spent $100 doing my hair and another $100 on my outfit. Like, I'm not really in the comparison game here. I'm just inviting the possibility to connect with the disappointment that a guy might feel if he's dropped $200+ on a dinner, and then when he texts you afterwards, you're not interested. Now, you absolutely have the right to be interested. None of this is about feigning interest or any of that. It's just to connect with his experience and not, as she was saying previously, be dismissive of it, right? That is really the value, I think, of this video, is to invite you to be more in the sorts of perspectives a guy may inhabit so that you can understand them more. Now, you still have your perspectives and experiences, and he could do the same for you. So none of this is about a one-way street. It's just, in this video, we're offering a specific opportunity, and I think it's a really good one to be in other people's
Doesn't
perspectives.
even like me for me. She just wants like a boyfriend.
I wish it were more socially expected.
So that, by the way, is also an experience, right? We talk about this, the personal and impersonal sides of dating. The impersonal side of dating could be, yeah, I want a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or I want a partner, or I want not to feel lonely. And those are things I want, sort of irrespective of the person in front of me. But if we're only in the impersonal and there's not really a personal and unique connection to the person in front of us, if they're sensitive, at least, they're going to pick that up. Oh, am I just the solution to your loneliness? Is this really that you want someone to take you for dinner? And by the way, when you're on dating apps as a guy, this is a super common thing from women, is something like, just get me off this app already. I hate this app. I'm dying. Someone sort of solve this for me, right? So if you're having the experience that you're kind of frustrated, you're lonely, the apps are killing you, you sort of want someone to solve that problem. And maybe for a little bit, you don't even care too much whether he's a great partner for you. You actually just want a guy that can take you out on a few fun dates, because actually, by the way, different than nearly all the other guys that you seem to be connecting with, who vaguely don't even have an ability to keep a conversation going. So you're like, well, if you can at least, pay for a date, initiate a date, take me on a date, follow up, initiate a date, that's a really cool thing. And so I think sometimes the masculine can also experience this, where it's, oh, how much are you actually into me, or how much are you into the fact that I'm able to take you on dates? Now, by the way, if you're a guy watching this right now, note to self, being able to initiate, pay for, and take women on multiple dates actually sets you apart from a lot of guys. So, it might not be as bad out there as you think. Okay, rant over. Let's go.
Expected to go Dutch on the first few dates, but you're like a jerk if you even suggest it.
And any experience that expands your
So I will just say, I think back in the day, I was a little bit more into this perspective, right? Like, let's both chip in until maybe we know that there's some kind of connection. But actually, I think it's good for the masculine to, I was going to say, evolve beyond that perspective and actually re-include, I think, a little bit more of the traditional perspective. I think the opportunity that we've been in this kind of, in some ways, feminization of culture, postmodernity, the equality movement, feminism, all really important advancements in my belief. And there's sometimes things that get thrown out and left behind. One of them might be the traditional masculine imperative about, let me organize and pay for, or at least lead in the paying for dates. And so if you're a guy that can't do that, won't do that, I think it's really good to dig into that perspective and kind of get real about that. Like, why is that? Is that you literally can't afford it? Well, if you can't afford it, maybe you might want to focus a little bit on something else and not focus so much on your dating right now, right? Or maybe you need to be more creative with the dates that you're going on. Maybe you've actually thrown out something around your ability to lead and initiate because you're looking so much for two leaders in a relationship, right? Or you're not comfortable with that aspect of your masculinity. And it might not be a particularly developed aspect of your masculinity. That's fine. None of this is about pretending you're someone you're not. It's just kind of good to check into that. Why do you need, or would you want to go Dutch? And realizing that that's going to have an impact, likely, particularly on a more feminine woman if she's in front of you.
your compassion and understanding is one that I think is worthy of sharing. So what about you? Have you had any experiences that have shifted your viewpoint dramatically? Let me know.
So I'd love to know, what are your experiences? Is it making sense? Can you relate to anything that she's saying? Perhaps you've even been a woman who dates men and has gone on some dates with them women, and it's opened you up to new perspectives. Perhaps you can't relate at all to what she's saying. Have you had guys that want to go Dutch with you? Have you had guys that have tried to invoice you for a date afterwards? Have you had awkward moments when it comes to paying for the check? Perhaps you're strongly in the perspective that he should pay and you've not noticed his initiation and you kind of begrudgingly hold out your purse? Have you done the fake purse maneuver where you're sort of faking that you would pay, but really it's not an authentic kind of wholehearted thing? I want to know your experiences. Leave me a comment beneath this video. As always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.